The particle effects shimmered across the massive screen, a nebula of my own creation. On stage, our publisher was calling Etherian's Gate a generational leap in interactive entertainment. In the crowd, developers, artists, and executives clinked champagne glasses, celebrating a triumph built on my sleepless nights. The game's heart was the Helios engine, a proprietary graphics and physics engine I had architected from the very first line of code. It was my life's work. But as I stood in the back, invisible in my own victory, I knew my name wouldn't be the one they remembered. My name is Aubrielle Lambert. At 34, I was the lead engine architect at Odyssey Interactive, though you wouldn't know it from the launch party that night. The venue buzzed with self-congratulation. Julian Croft, our director of production, stood at the podium, his voice echoing through the sound system, talking about collaborative genius and synergistic vision. I watched, nursing a glass of lukewarm Prosecco that tasted like betrayal. The screen behind him showcased the real-time fluid dynamics I had patented, the procedural world generation that had saved the company millions in artist hours. Every algorithm, every shader, every optimization had my fingerprints on it. And special recognition goes to Leo Vance, Julian announced, raising his glass toward my colleague. His promotion to studio technical director is a testament to his incredible vision in guiding the Helios engine to its full potential. Vision. Leo's primary contribution had been taking my technical reports, adding his name to the cover page, and presenting them in meetings I was never invited to. He was a master of PowerPoint, not C++. I felt my phone vibrate. A message from Maya, the sharpest junior programmer on my team. This is absolute bullshit, and everyone knows it. After the applause died, I made my way to Julian's temporary office backstage. The hallway, lined with posters of the game's heroic characters, felt impossibly long. "Aubrielle, come in," Julian said, not looking up from his tablet. His office smelled of expensive leather and the kind of forced energy that permeated corporate leadership. "I know what you're going to say." "Do you?" I kept my voice level. Cold. 5 years of letting my work speak for itself had taught me that passionate women in tech get labeled as difficult. They get managed out. He finally looked up, offering the placating smile I'd seen him give investors 100 times. "Look, you're a brilliant architect. Nobody disputes that. A true foundational asset. But Leo has the soft skills, the ability to communicate the technical vision to stakeholders." He leaned back, the picture of practiced authority. "Company policy dictates we need leaders who can interface with the board, who can sell the dream. You understand? Company policy. The same excuse they used last year when they gave the lead on the DLC to a man who still asked me to explain basic linear algebra. I built that entire engine, Julian," I said, each word measured and precise. "The patent applications for the core rendering pipeline have my name on them. The architectural documents, the code reviews, the vendor presentations when Leo was mysteriously unavailable. And you've been compensated very well for your technical contributions." Julian's tone hardened. "Your bonus will be substantial, but leadership roles require more than just technical skill. More than technical skill. More than reverse engineering a competitor's lighting system over a single weekend. More than debugging a memory leak that was crashing the console dev kits 48 hours before our certification deadline. More than being the only person who actually understood the intricate dependencies holding our entire digital world together." I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. "I see. Thank you for clarifying." "Aubrielle," Julian called as I reached the door. "You're valuable here. Don't do anything rash." I turned back, and for the first time that night, I let a real smile show. Not the eager, trying to please smile I had worn for years, but something else. Something that made Julian shift uncomfortably in his designer chair. "Of course not," I said. "I'm nothing if not an architect of stable systems." Back at my apartment, I pulled up an encrypted personal drive labeled Contingency. Inside was the design documentation from 2 years ago, when Odyssey Interactive was facing a hostile takeover from a massive, soulless corporation. They had planned to gut our entire R&D department, absorb our IP, and lay off the core engineering team. I had been called into an emergency meeting at 10 p.m. "It's nothing personal, Aubrielle," the CFO had said, "but their offer is too good. We need to prepare for consolidation." Consolidation. A neat corporate word for erasure. I spent that entire night poring over our engine's architecture, looking for leverage, for a way to make myself and my work indispensable. That's when I designed it. To protect our intellectual property from being easily stolen or reverse engineered, I proposed a new, state-of-the-art digital rights management and anti-cheat system, embedded deep within the engine's core. "Julian," I had said in the presentation the next morning, my voice carefully neutral, "I need to add a small provision to the engine's core validation protocol. It's a security measure." "What kind of provision?" "The engine's core libraries should perform a validation check against our internal servers before accepting any major updates. This check will be tied to the signing key of the primary architect, ensuring no unauthorized code can be injected into the build." It was a masterpiece of digital security disguised as corporate compliance. Julian had been thrilled. "You mean you want to make sure a potential buyer can't just fire our team and hand the engine over to someone who doesn't know what they're doing?" "Something like that," I'd admitted. "Brilliant girl. Draft the proposal." The code I wrote was a work of art. It specified that the multi-million-dollar Helios engine was cryptographically tied to the digital signature of the lead engine architect. Any change in that person's title, status, or recognized role within the company's HR system would trigger a validation failure on the next major patch deployment. The legal department saw the technical jargon and rubber-stamped it as standard IP protection. The executives were too focused on the anti-cheat features that would protect their microtransaction revenue to notice the kill switch I had embedded in the heart of their golden goose. I pulled up the email chain from that time, reading Julian's glowing response. "Excellent work, Aubrielle. This kind of forward thinking is what makes you such a valuable foundational asset." Foundational asset. Even when I was saving their jobs, I was still just a part of the building, not the architect. Over the next 2 years, I carefully wove that validation protocol into the fabric of our operations. Every new game, every tool, every analytics system was built on the Helios platform. When other engineers suggested using a licensed third-party engine, I had perfectly logical arguments about performance, cost, and customizability. No one questioned the quiet woman who made everything just work. No one thought to ask why I was so insistent on maintaining this particular security protocol. They just saw the results: stunning visuals, stable frame rates, and games that sold millions. I had even documented everything meticulously. What looked like standard operating procedures were actually a breadcrumb trail leading back to that single validation check. Every technical document referenced the architect authentication protocol. Every training manual for new programmers mentioned the critical importance of maintaining build integrity. If anyone had been paying attention, they would have seen it, but I was invisible, the woman behind the curtain that nobody bothered to look at while they applauded the wizard on stage. Now, sitting in my dark apartment, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face, I opened a new folder on my personal drive. Endgame. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Maya. "Heard Leo is getting a massive stock options package with his promotion. 7 figures. For taking credit for my work." I closed the chat and began organizing 2 years of evidence. 2 years of preparation for a moment I had hoped would never come, but somehow always knew would. They thought they were denying me a promotion. In reality, they were lighting a fuse I had placed 2 years ago. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6:45 a.m., an hour before anyone else. The empty studio felt different now, not peaceful, but charged with potential. I began my evidence collection with surgical precision. First, the emails. I forwarded 5 years of correspondence to a private account in small, untraceable batches. The email where Julian explicitly called me the chief architect of Helios when introducing me to a hardware partner. The one where the CEO personally thanked me for single-handedly optimizing the engine for the next generation of consoles, saving the launch of our flagship title. The thread where Leo asked me to explain what a quaternion was 2 months ago. Next, the Perforce archives. Our version control system was my star witness. Perforce didn't lie. Every check-in, every change, every line of code had an author. My username was on 95% of the commits to the core rendering and physics modules. Leo was on 1%, all of them cosmetic changes to comment blocks or variable names. I exported the entire commit history. Tens of thousands of lines of irrefutable proof, but the real treasure was in the patent filings. I pulled up the 2 patents for our proprietary real-time global illumination and fluid simulation systems. Both listed me as the sole inventor. The company owned the patents, yes, but inventorship is a matter of legal record. You couldn't just erase an inventor because they were inconvenient. The financial analysis came next. I had kept meticulous records. The clustering algorithm that reduced light baking times by 70%, saving an estimated $4 million in server costs and artist overtime. The predictive physics model that allowed for the destructible environments featured in all our marketing, directly linked to an 18% increase in pre-orders. I had documented everything, all with my digital signature. "You're here early," a voice said behind me. Leo, of course. Was trying to look the part of a dedicated director. "Just reviewing the telemetry from the launch," I replied without turning. "The overnight server load showed some interesting anomalies. Anything I should know about?" His voice carried that new note of practiced authority. I finally turned, offering him a flat, emotionless smile. "Nothing you'd understand without context. I'll handle it." His face tightened. Well, as the new studio technical director, I should be kept informed of all system issues. Not even officially announced to the whole company, and he was already flexing. "Of course," I said, turning back to my screen. "I'll send you the raw compiler logs, all 40,000 lines. I'm sure you'll find them illuminating." He hovered for a moment, then walked away. I heard him telling someone by the coffee machine about the importance of managing creative personalities. I added the interaction to my own private log. Then I opened one final folder: legal precedents. Over the past year, I had researched cases where DRM and software licensing had been used in corporate disputes. The case law was fascinating. A developer's signature, if contractually required for validation, was legally binding. My phone vibrated, an Outlook notification. "Team meeting, 2 p.m. studio organizational updates." The official announcement. I saved my final files, encrypted the backup drive, and leaned back in my chair. Everything was ready. 2 years of preparation, 5 years of evidence, and one carefully crafted cryptographic key that was about to become a $50 million lesson in why you shouldn't steal credit from the person who holds the keys to your entire kingdom. The cracks started small, like hairline fractures in glass before it shatters. It began with Maya from the engine team, a sharp kid who actually read my documentation. I watched her from across the open office as she pulled up the Helios engine's core validation script on her monitor. It was 3:20 p.m., 2 days after the announcement of Leo's promotion. Her forehead creased. She scrolled down, then back up. She opened another tab, our internal HR organizational chart, then back to the code. I saw the exact moment she found it. Her eyes widened, and she immediately minimized the window, glancing around nervously as if she'd stumbled upon a state secret. Which in a way she had. Within an hour, the whispers started. Not obvious ones. Tech teams learned subtlety after too many layoffs justified by culture fit. But I could see it in the way conversations paused when Leo walked by, in the sideways glances during his afternoon briefing where he badly mangled an explanation of our new particle rendering system. "Aubrielle," Maya approached my desk around 4 p.m., her voice low. "Can I ask you something? Hypothetical." I didn't look up from my code review. Hypothetical questions are my favorite kind. If someone's digital signature was specifically hard-coded into a critical validation protocol, and that person's role changed, would that matter? "Depends on the protocol's language," I said evenly. Code is like a contract. Sometimes a single Boolean flag can be the difference between true and false, between valid and void. She shifted nervously. "And if it was a DRM check, like, for something mission-critical that gets updated constantly?" I finally looked up, meeting her eyes with perfect calm. "Then I imagine someone should probably review that protocol very carefully, hypothetically." Maya practically ran back to her desk. Within minutes, I saw the notification for our team's private Slack channel light up. They'd forgotten I still had admin access from when I set up the server 3 years ago. "Holy shit," Maya wrote. "Look at Engine Core Validation, auth, CPP, line 432. A senior programmer replied almost instantly. "Is that what I think it is? Is that even legal?" "Legal and enforceable. I just checked the original design doc. Aubrielle wrote it 2 years ago when they were threatening to outsource us. Does Leo know? Does Julian know? We're running everything on Helios. Everything. Patch 1.05 is scheduled to deploy automatically in 48 hours. And it requires the lead engine architect's signature to validate, a role that no longer officially exists in the HR system." I continued working, my expression neutral, while the technical teams collectively discovered the time bomb I had planted 2 years ago. The beauty of being underestimated is that people never suspect you're capable of playing the long game. By 5:15 p.m., The panic had spread to the senior engineers. Tom, who'd been with the company for 8 years and had mentored me when I first started, stood up abruptly from his desk and walked straight to Julian's office. The door closed, but through the glass walls, I could see animated gestures. Tom pointing at his laptop screen, Julian's face shifting from confusion to concern to outright alarm. Leo, meanwhile, was in the main conference room, practicing his presentation for an upcoming creative leadership workshop, completely oblivious to the storm gathering around him. I could hear his voice carrying across the floor. The key to managing creative assets is establishing clear ownership and a top-down vision, creative assets. Still using that phrase. Sarah, a network engineer from another team, messaged me directly. "Aubrielle, did you know about the authentication key?" "I wrote it," I replied simply. "Jesus Christ, do you know what this means?" "I know exactly what it means." The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, a single message came through. "They are so fucked, aren't they?" I didn't respond, but I did allow myself a small, satisfied smile as I watched Julian's office door open and Tom emerge, looking pale. Julian immediately picked up his phone, probably calling legal. The next morning, the atmosphere was electric with suppressed panic. The entire engine team was in by 7 a.m., unprecedented for a group that usually strolled in around 9:30. They were running system audits, checking dependencies, trying to map out just how deeply the architect authentication protocol was embedded in our systems. The answer, which I could have told them, was completely. Every database query for player assets, every connection to the server, every transaction in the in-game store, all of it ran through the core Helios engine. It wasn't just mission critical, it was the mission. "Emergency architecture review," Leo announced, trying to project authority while sweat beaded on his forehead. "We need to assess our security protocol dependencies." I raised my hand. "I have the complete documentation for the architect authentication protocol." "Would you like me to present it?" He hesitated, caught between needing my expertise and maintaining his new position. "Just send me the files, I'll review and present them." "Of course," I said. I sent him the 800-page technical specification, knowing he wouldn't understand a tenth of it. "Let me know if you need any clarification on the cryptographic handshake implementation." The murmurs grew louder throughout the day. Jennifer from legal had been in Julian's office 3 times. HR had pulled all the original R&D policy files. The CFO had canceled his afternoon meetings. Around 2 p.m., I overheard a conversation by the coffee machine between 2 junior programmers. It literally says, "Lead Engine Architect Aubrielle Lambert" in the original commit notes, but they just promoted Leo over her. Exactly, which means the next patch push will fail validation. Can't they just change her title back? After publicly announcing Leo. After what they did to her, would you accept that? Fuck no. Yeah, we're screwed. I walked past them to get water and they fell silent. In the kitchen, I found Maya Stress eating a bag of chips. "Aubrielle," she said quietly, "you knew this would happen." It wasn't a question. "I knew the terms of the protocol I designed," I said, filling my water bottle. "I designed it to protect the company's intellectual property from being compromised by instability. By making yourself the stability." I turned to look at her directly. By ensuring that the person who actually understands this system remains in a position to maintain it. "Tell me, Maya, can Leo debug a race condition in the multi-threaded physics engine? Can he optimize a recursive shader that's eating up GPU cycles? Can he explain to Sony why our custom implementation needs kernel-level access for the next console generation?" Maya's silence was answer enough. "I didn't make myself irreplaceable," I continued. "I've trained 6 people, including you, on various parts of this system. What I did was make my recognition non-negotiable." As I walked back to my desk, I passed the executive conference room. Through the glass, I could see Julian, the CFO, the head of legal, and interestingly, no Leo. Their faces were grim, their laptop screens full of what looked like dense technical documentation. The first crack had become a spiderweb of fractures. All it would take now was the slightest pressure for everything to shatter. The email that lit the fuse was beautifully simple. Monday morning, 8:47 a.m., I sent a 3-line message to the internal IT compliance department. The subject line was, "FYI, potential compliance issue with patch 1.05. Team," I wrote. "I wanted to ensure you're aware of a potential compliance matter regarding the Helios engine's architect authentication protocol for the upcoming patch deployment." There appear to be inconsistencies with current organizational structures. Please advise on appropriate next steps. I CC'd no one. I added no drama, no threats, just a professional engineer doing her due diligence. Then I went to the break room and made myself a cup of tea. By 9:15 a.m., I could see Jennifer from legal practically sprinting to Julian's office, her laptop clutched against her chest. Through the glass walls, those transparent barriers they'd installed to promote openness and collaboration, I watched her pull up documents on Julian's screen, pointing at specific paragraphs with increasing urgency. Julian's face went through a fascinating evolution: confusion, understanding, disbelief, and finally, a kind of pale horror that made him look like he'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. By 10 a.m., Leo's creative leadership sync meeting had been mysteriously canceled. He stood in the middle of the open office, looking lost, still clutching his prepared presentation. "Did anyone else get the cancellation?" he asked loudly. The few developers who made eye contact just shrugged and turned back to their screens. Everyone knew something was happening. Only Leo seemed oblivious. At 10:30 a.m., the Chief Human Resources Officer herself, Patricia Weinstein, arrived. I had seen her in person exactly twice in 5 years. She walked past my desk without a glance, her heels clicking a sharp staccato against the polished concrete floor as she disappeared into Julian's increasingly crowded office. The engineering floor was dead silent. Everyone was pretending to work while secretly refreshing the team's Slack every 30 seconds for updates. Maya had found more details. The validation check runs on the master server during the final build compilation. If it fails, the build is cryptographically locked. It won't deploy. "When is the final compilation?" someone asked. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. It's automated. So we have about 24 hours before the entire game for our 10 million players goes dark." Leo finally seemed to grasp that something was terribly wrong. He approached the cluster of engineers, trying to assert authority. "What's this about a failed build? Why was I informed?" Tom looked at him with barely concealed contempt. "'Cause you were too busy practicing your leadership workshop to read the critical infrastructure documentation Aubrielle sent you last week." "I delegated that review to? To who, Leo? Who did you delegate understanding our entire engine architecture to?" The room went quiet. Leo's face flushed red. "I don't appreciate your tone. As team lead?" "You're not my team lead," Tom interrupted. "According to the engine's core security protocol, Aubrielle says so right there in immutable code." At 2 p.m., Julian emerged from his office. He looked haggard, his usually polished appearance crumbling at the edges. His eyes found me across the floor. "Aubrielle, my office, now." I saved my work, pushed back from my desk with deliberate calm, and walked through the silent office. Every eye followed me, some with sympathy, some with awe, most with a kind of morbid curiosity about what would happen when an unstoppable force met an immovable line of code. Patricia from HR was there, along with Jennifer from legal. Leo was notably absent. "Sit," Julian said. "It wasn't a request. I sat, crossing my legs, maintaining eye contact." "You know what you've done," he started, his voice strained. "I've ensured the continuity and security of our core intellectual property," I replied evenly, "as has been my job for 5 years. You've created a hostage situation." "I've created a quality assurance mechanism," I corrected him. "There's a difference." Patricia, the HR director, leaned forward. "Ms. Lambert, are you aware that your actions could be construed as corporate sabotage?" "Are you aware," I countered, my voice like ice, "that misrepresenting an individual's contributions and denying recognition contractually required for system validation while continuing to profit from their work could be construed as fraud?" The room went silent. Jennifer was furiously taking notes. Julian's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted: recognition for my work, compensation commensurate with my contributions, and the position that was given to someone who can't even explain our own rendering pipeline." "That's not how this works." "Actually," Jennifer from legal interrupted, looking up from her notes with a grim expression. "That's exactly how this works. Her name and role are cryptographically and contractually tied to the system's operation. Ms. Lambert's position is, for lack of a better term, ironclad." Julian's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. "This is extortion." "This is software licensing," Jennifer corrected, "and from what I've reviewed, we are in breach." I stood up. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to figure out your next move. That's when the patch build automatically compiles and deploys. I'd suggest you use that time wisely." As I reached the door, Julian called out, his voice hoarse. "You planned this. 2 years ago, you planned this." I turned back, allowing myself the smallest of smiles. 2 years ago, you planned to let a competitor fire my entire team to make a profit. I planned for survival. This, I gestured to the room full of panicked executives, this is just the natural consequence of treating your most valuable asset like a disposable resource. I walked out, leaving them to contemplate the cost of their organizational choices. They had less than 24 hours to realize that the person they had overlooked, undervalued, and passed over wasn't just holding their next patch hostage. I was holding their entire 10 million player universe. And the ransom was simply what I had been worth all along. The collapse began at 9:01 a.m. on Tuesday. I was sitting in my breakfast nook, coffee steaming in front of me, laptop open to the company's public server status page. The first indication wasn't a warning, but a global wave of failure. The status for every Ethereum's Gate server worldwide flipped from green to red in the span of 5 seconds. The automated patch had tried to deploy, failed its cryptographic validation, and as a result, the master server locked out every player client exactly as I had designed it to. By 9:05 a.m., my phone was buzzing continuously. Slack, email, text messages, a digital symphony of panic. I turned it face down on the counter and took another sip of coffee. The in-game store, the one that generated an estimated $40 million in quarterly revenue, went dark. The player metrics dashboard I had built went blank. 10 million players, suddenly staring at an error message on their screens. Client authentication error, 34 Lambert. My signature. I knew what was happening at the office without being there. The community managers would be drowning in a tidal wave of angry tweets and Discord messages. The network operations team would be frantically trying to roll back a patch that couldn't be rolled back, only replaced by a valid one. By the time the West Coast gaming press woke up, it would be a full-blown catastrophe. My phone rang. Julian, I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Marcus Thorne, the CEO, a man who had spoken to me exactly once in 5 years at a holiday party where he'd praised my neat little graphics project. I let that go to voicemail too. At 10:30 a.m., I drove to the office, not because they'd called, but because I wanted to witness the aftermath firsthand. The parking lot was chaos. Cars abandoned at angles, people half running toward the building. Through the glass lobby, I could see security trying to manage a crowd of employees. I used my physical architect's keycard, one of only 3 in existence, which I'd insisted on keeping for emergency diagnostic purposes. The engineering floor was a war room, laptops everywhere, cables strung between desks, people shouting across the space. Someone had brought in a whiteboard and was desperately trying to map our system dependencies. It looked like a spider web drawn by someone having a breakdown. Aubrielle. Maya practically collapsed with relief when she saw me. Thank God. I'm just here to collect some personal items, I said calmly, walking past her toward my desk. Leo was in the center of the chaos, his shirt untucked, sweat staining his expensive collar. We need all hands to debug this, he shouted at me. This is not the time for what, Leo? I turned to face him, my voice cutting cleanly across the floor. For pointing out that you don't even know how to access the master server's diagnostic console. That you've been studio technical director for less than a week and you can't even tell them which validation log to check? The room went silent. The authentication key is invalid, I continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's not a bug, it's not a glitch. It is a security protocol violation. And until that is resolved at a corporate level, every system built on Helios, which is everything, will remain locked. We'll sue you, someone from marketing shouted from the doorway. Read the protocol documentation, I replied without looking at them. Section 4, subsection B. Any attempt to bypass the architect authentication protocol is defined as a material breach of our IP security policy. You can't sue me for enforcing the rules you approved. The CEO, Marcus Thorne, had arrived, flanked by what looked like the entire C-suite. Ms. Lambert, he said, his voice dangerously low. We need to discuss terms. No, I said simply. You need to decide if you're going to honor the terms of your own security protocol. I'm just an employee, a foundational asset, as I've been reminded. Patricia from HR stepped forward. Aubrielle, please, the entire company is at stake. Our players, our partners, everything. Everything I built, I interrupted. Everything I maintained. Everything I was told wasn't important enough to warrant a leadership role or proper recognition. Funny how important it is now. My desk phone rang, the old analog line they'd never bothered to remove. The caller ID showed an external number, a partner. I knew who it was before I answered. I put him on speaker. The entire floor held its breath. Aubrielle, my dear. The voice of Sony's head of partner relations filled the space, sharp and concerned. I'm getting some very interesting alerts from your system. It seems we have a global service outage tied to a client authentication failure. It seems we do, I said. Our agreement is quite specific. It requires a 99.9% uptime. This outage puts you in breach of our platform contract. We're losing millions an hour here. I'm sure it's just an administrative oversight, I said lightly. Administrative oversights in contracts tend to be expensive, he said, his tone like steel. My legal team is recommending an immediate suspension of our partnership until this is resolved. We can't risk our platform's reputation on a partner who can't manage their own security. That seems prudent, I agreed. Of course, he continued, and I could hear the unspoken part of our years-long professional relationship in his voice. If the proper technical oversight were restored, with appropriate documentation, we could resume services immediately. Our contract is quite clear on that point. The line went dead. I looked around the room at Leo's deflated confusion, at Julian's barely contained rage, at Marcus Thorne's calculating stare. The validation check can be reinitiated with a signed key, I announced. The system needs to recognize the credentials of the lead engine architect. If the terms aren't met, the lockout becomes permanent. You'll have to rebuild the entire validation system from scratch, a 6-month project minimum. How much? Marcus asked quietly. To fix this, you mean my terms? He nodded. Vice President of Engine Technology, reporting directly to you. A new division, Odyssey Labs, under my exclusive control, focused on next-generation R&D, a base salary of $600,000, and a significant equity package. And the immediate termination of Julian Croft and Leo Vance for gross mismanagement of critical infrastructure. I picked up my personal coffee mug, the one thing I'd actually come for, and headed for the stairs. Where are you going? Julian demanded. Home, I said. I'm just a technical resource, remember? And right now you have a business problem. When you figure out that those are often the same thing, you know how to find me. As I walked down the stairs, I heard Marcus Thorne say the words I'd waited 5 years to hear. Get her back, whatever it takes. But it was too late for whatever it takes. Now it would cost them exactly what I was worth. The call from Marcus came at 8:43. His tone wasn't angry, but defeated. Aubrielle, he said simply, the board has approved all your terms, all of them. The contracts are being drafted by our legal team as we speak. The terminations will be handled by morning. Then we have an agreement, I said. Aubrielle, he said, and his tone shifted to something almost resembling respect. You could have done this at any time in the last 2 years. Why now? I thought about the question. About the years of being overlooked, the nights spent fixing critical bugs while others took credit, the slow erosion of my hope that merit would ever be enough. Because this week, you didn't just pass me over. You celebrated it. You threw a party for my replacement, made it public, made it clear that no matter what I built, I would never be seen as a leader. You crossed a line from neglect to insult. And that's when patience becomes pathetic. I see, he said quietly. Once I'm vice president, you'll have the most sophisticated and stable game engine in the industry. You'll have a roadmap for innovation that leaves competitors scrambling. You will have a leader who understands both the technology and the business strategy. Everything you thought Leo would bring, except I will actually deliver it. How do we know you won't do this again? Because once I have what I've earned, I have no reason to. I'm not vindictive, Marcus. I'm practical. This was never about revenge. It was about correcting a fatal system error. The $50 million you lost today, that's just the cost of the lesson. At 11:59 p.m., my phone buzzed with the company-wide announcement. Odyssey Interactive is pleased to announce the appointment of Aubrielle Lambert as Vice President of Engine Technology, effective immediately. Below it, in smaller text, the company also announces the departure of Julian Croft and Leo Vance, who are pursuing other opportunities. Corporate speak for being fired so fast they left scorch marks. I opened my laptop, connected to the company's secure server, and began typing a single, long command string. A cryptographic key only I possessed. The systems were being prepared to come back online. Not because I had to, my contract didn't start until morning, but because those systems were mine. They had always been mine. And now, finally, everyone knew it. At exactly 6:00 a.m., as the sunrise painted my apartment gold, every server for Etherian's Gate flickered back to life. The revenue counters resumed their climb. The data flowed. The company breathed again. My first day as vice president began at 7 a.m. sharp. My new office, Marcus Thorne's old one, had a view of the entire city. My first act was to call an all-hands meeting for the engineering division. When everyone had gathered, I stood at the front of the room. What happened this week was not revenge, I began. It was a system correction. For years, I have watched talented people in this room be overlooked and mismanaged. That ends today. I pulled up a slide. Effective immediately, Odyssey Labs is being formed. It will be a place for pure innovation. Promotions and bonuses will be tied to measurable contributions. The commit logs don't lie. The system logs don't lie. If you build it, you will be rewarded for it. I looked directly at Maya. Our first new hire for the labs is Maya as our new lead engine architect. The room was quiet. Then Tom, the senior engineer, started clapping. Slowly, others joined in. It was the sound of justice. 6 months later, I stood in the boardroom presenting our quarterly results. Revenue up 42%. Player satisfaction at an all-time high. Odyssey Labs had already filed 3 new patents. After the presentation, Marcus asked me to stay. "I've been in business for 30 years, he said. "I've never seen anything quite like what you did." "What I did was ensure my value was recognized," I replied. "What you did," he said with a wry smile, "was orchestrate the most elegant corporate coup I've ever witnessed. You didn't just win, Aubrielle, you rewrote the rules of the game." "For 5 years, I played by the existing rules," I said, gathering my things. "I was patient, professional, and I delivered results. I was ignored. So I stopped asking and I started architecting a new system. The only difference between me and the men who have done this for decades is that I used code instead of backroom deals." As I walked back to my office, with its walls covered in architectural diagrams and patent awards, I thought about the future. We weren't just building games anymore. We were building a new kind of company, one with architectural integrity that didn't depend on ignoring the people who actually held it up. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Leo Vance had updated his status, seeking new opportunities in creative leadership. I archived the notification without reading it. Some people never learn that leadership isn't about taking credit. It's about understanding who really holds the keys to the kingdom and never, ever underestimating them again.